Hello, everyone. Good day. My name is Monica. Moving a few things out of the way, and I just wanted to give a quick video on my story of abuse. I did mean to do this a while back, as it was going to be a prelude to a segment that I've done with a great organization that I found called the National Association for Adult Survivors of Childhood Abuse, or NAASCA. I'll drop their link and everything in the bio. After months and months and months of researching and tying in with me initially kicking off Confessions of Being a Woman, I was able to find that group, really jump into immediate communication with them, and I was invited to do a blog talk radio podcast with them a while back. So I will put the full link as you go into the website for things I'll say they're at least a month or so old. You'll have to get into the archives to find them, but I'll definitely make sure that I put the link in. I wanted to take the time today, while I had a little bit of time. I'm actually getting ready to get online to start teaching a class. But as I reached out to someone that I think is going to be a great mentor for me, meeting her through that organization, and having time the past couple of weeks to be home, and not have the rigmarole of being out day to day, back and forth to work. I do know that it's more imperative that I do want to eventually start working on my book. And as she and I were speaking the other day, and we shared information that we do know that it is imperative to understand that with so many people being at home, abuse doesn't take a day off. It really doesn't. With that being said, I want to say that knowledge is food for the soul. Please take this video as you will and share it, like it, comment on it positively, please. But keep in mind that even though we are all systematically, globally, as we should be as one community, fighting something bigger than ourselves, they're just people in the world who are broken and hurt, and they hurt other people. And that is the root of abuse. With that being said, I wanted this story, again, if you listen to the podcast, I'm not going to make this intro too long because a good bit of the information came out in the podcast. Those of you who know me personally, you know that I have lupus. Lupus that I know now within the past 3 to 4 years of more and more work and more research has come out. I can thank the Lupus Foundation of America being a great advocate for lupus survivors and lupus awareness, bringing different information about what's going on with my body, trying to keep a diary of that, journal it, take it back and forth to my doctors. And for what they told me 17 odd years ago, that they did not know what this illness really was, where it came from, where it stemmed from, other than I just had it. And it shows up in different things. Vitiligo here. You guys can see the melanin changes in my skin. Long over the insecurity of that. And primarily it's shown up in RA. Initially, in my early years as a cosmetologist, it showed up as just carpal tunnel syndrome, and we know now that it is full on RA, rheumatoid arthritis. We do know now that since this is a immuno deficiency illness, autoimmune diseases, there's a reason that your body just starts attacking itself. Autoimmune diseases have a cluster of diseases underneath that, which would be lupus, scleroderma, sarcoidosis. I believe that is what Bernie Mac, one of my favorite entertainers, passed away from. I knew another teacher who had scleroderma, Lyme disease, a few other things like that. These are all autoimmune diseases, not necessarily classified as lupus. But there's a reason that your autoimmune system begins to attack itself. What I know now for sure, further, and this came up in the Blog Talk Radio podcast, and I made it the point, and we had one of the other co-hosts or the panelists that chimed in and backed that up. ACEs, ACEs are classified as adverse childhood experiences. And the beginner research started from a doctor, and what hit home for me is I saw a Black woman. I'll have to find the podcast that was a TED Talk. I will put that link from YouTube in the description as well. Look at that. And I can't say that she was the initial doctor, but she is one who is spearheading research into what ACEs are and what they do for childhood bodies, your physical development. We know now that at 46 years old, the majority of my childhood was spent in abuse. Two alcoholic parents. One primary abuser was my father, George. The secondary abuser was my mother, Lola, who was a classic enabler and did absolutely nothing and probably felt too powerless herself, being an abused wife, to protect her children. Through the plethora of years of not daily abuse, but enough of the stress and the threat that you were going to be abused and the fear that you lived in being abused. And again, I can't say what's generational and not generational. I can say it's a learned behavior. And it's very clear to me more now that as a classic abuser, my father learned to abuse, and primarily from his father. My mother learned to enable abuse, primarily from her mother, grandmothers are responsible for raising her. Let's just be real. Abuse is nothing new, but the social services as we know it today didn't give a fuck about Black kids during my growing up. I had a father who carried a pistol, who carried a shotgun, and did a very good job in order to, in his mind, keep the peace and keep control of his household, threaten any and everybody around him. We, as kids that I can remember, were never personally threatened with the weapons, but I saw my father, yes, threaten, load his pistol, unload them. You shot at our dogs in the backyard, just, gone. That type of witnessing of that, and I joked with it early on. I know how not to use it in a way to make light of it now. But, and my father being ex-military, I grew up in a war zone, an emotional war zone. And so ACEs helps to determine if there are things that are excessive stressors on the child's psyche and emotional state, and things that you internalize that are unhealthy, that do not allow you as a participant unwilling in that to grow and develop in a healthy way. Were we fed by our parents? Yes. Were we clothed by our parents? Yes. And my parents did a very good job of appearing to be good people, because people that I still speak with now that were either close to my parents then or certain family members now, they still draw blame. I didn't know that happened. Wow. However, they do know at various family functions, my father was always the one turned up. Always. Like, ain't nobody fucking with him. What I didn't realize now that I do now, back then, it's just a classic bully. And that stemmed from whatever in his childhood. Trust me, they didn't need in that generation any excessive friends or families. There's 13 or 14 of them running around in a 2-room house in the country, 5 minutes on the outskirts of Birmingham. And so I grew up with a plethora of cousins. And that was our weekend entertainment. What uncle, primarily the boys, what uncle was going to get drunk first and who was going to knock who out, like over a game of cards or playing dominoes or some shit at 20-something years old. They bringing up shit you did to me when we was 8 or 9, and they still going at it as if it had just happened that day. So, as my mentor said the other day, focusing on writing of what I need to put in the book to make sure that I'm putting some humor in there. If not, it's just going to be so heavy and so dark, even though, yes, this is what I lived through. You don't want to lose the reader. And so I can remember us as kids, we just making jokes about everything all the time. And I realized that joking nature was our coping mechanism, and that's what got us through it. I do see, unfortunately, moving closer and closer to knocking this counseling degree out, and becoming more and more aware, again, by changing my circumstances, that there's still 40 and 50-year-old people out here. If they're not abusers themselves, their coping mechanism shows up in different ways. And when I see people that are laughing, kiki, ha-haing, taking little tear downs at each other, slightly bullying each other here, doing bullshit like that, and I'm seeing a 40 or 50-year-old person with 12-year-old behavior. That's where they're stuck. That's the only thing that they learned, and then that's the only thing they feel that they can learn. And at 40 and 50 years old, they're still exhibiting that behavior. The same goes for the actual abuser. You learn that behavior somewhere in your upbringing, and you've never bothered to listen to your own voice strong enough that you did not deserve to be abused, you didn't want to be abused, and you wanted to do something about the abuse. And I can say, thank goodness to my creator, God, Buddha, Allah, whoever, whatever name you want to apply to it, thank you to my creator that they decided that I needed a different path. I could have turned to drugs, I could have turned to alcohol, and I could have turned to self-abuse. Don't get me wrong, I still socialize and do my thing, and I have partied and hung out with the best of them. Just deciding not to become an alcoholic or an addict is a conscious decision, because you weren't born that way. You weren't born taking a drink. I'll put it that way. You were born of the parent or the mother or the father that was an addict. So you may be predisposed to having that chemical imbalance in your body. Get it? But somewhere along the line, you make decisions and you're responsible for your own choices. And with that being said, I knew that I never wanted to be an abuser. More emphatically, to make sure that abuse never happened at my hands to another individual, I knew that I never wanted to be a mother. I never wanted to be anything like my mother, and I never wanted to be swayed under the stresses of raising kids and being in a situation where this man whoever would abuse me, and I would have to expose kids to that. I didn't want any of it. So I've done a good job over my life of making sure that, and again, becoming heightened and aware of situations around me. When shit is showing up like this for me, I'm out. Never spending too much time. I can hope and wish for the best for a person, and people show up to you with their best representative. And whether it's just the evil thing that they've actually cloaked themselves to show up as this overly nice person, I do believe now that people just don't have the ability to control their own behavior. So they think the nastiness, the snideness, the unkindness, and then eventually the bullying, the abuse, and whatever else shows up. They don't think anything is wrong with it because they haven't been exposed to anything else. So no, I'm not going to apologize anymore for being a kind person. I'm not going to apologize anymore for being a person who don't want to do dumb shit, who ain't getting involved with ignorant shit. I ain't apologizing for none of that, for nobody. It's a choice. And it don't lead to nothing other than more stupidity, more asinineness, more dumb shit, more ignorance. All of that shit is self-abuse. I love myself too fucking much to let anybody ever again in my life come across my path and attempt to dim the light that I've been graced with, to attempt to stomp out my joy. It just ain't gonna happen. I spent years early on in a very aggravated, pissed off mode because people doing shit, and felt that I wanted to do something about it, didn't have the right tools to do anything about it, and just getting pissed off with people. And eventually not seeing these people growing and changing, and just walk away. Part of that really began to change when I got my lupus diagnosis and realized that I can't afford to wait until I get mad, angry, or pissed off. That was leading to stress. Stress for someone in my position ain't good, period, at all. So I had to learn to let it go. Let shit go, let people go, bye, get the fuck on. Like I ain't got nothing for you. On a personal note, I did spend a good bit of time alienating people quickly, like cutting them off quickly. Then part of me started to think, well, maybe I'm getting a little too just quick to judge people. Give them another chance and be there for people. And again, not listening to my intuition. Gave people another chance, different people, different scenarios, whatever. I dated a different guy, but same behavior, same this or that. And the same bullshit showed up again. So again, me further growing as a person and realizing that it ain't about them. It ain't about them. It was about me. And this thing that we call behavior is real. This thing that we called choices and changes in life, that's real. And my joy and happiness that I sought out for all these other years, I could no longer seek it out externally. It had to come from within. And if anyone else was a distraction to that, you gotta go. You gotta go. I do know one of my favorite authors, Dr. M. Scott Peck, and I mentioned in previous videos. The road less traveled was the light bulb for me. The ding, ding, ding. Everything that I was seeking out, the road to self-improvement, the road to soul searching, and all of that I've been on for years. I'm a Scorpio, so I'm big into my astrology, started really studying a little bit more numerology. My PhD is kind of leading me down those roads. Things that happen not so much as physically, but metaphysically, the sense of why you're here. The field of ontology is not new, but it is becoming more and more validated and accepted in non-traditional sectors in life. And it's really been the best thing for me. The road less traveled finally put me on that path. My own hero's journey, I call it. Dr. Peck, in one of the three novels in that trilogy, it's basically allude to people receiving an education and wanting to grow and change. And it's nothing wrong, and I can validate that there's nothing wrong with the individual's, I just dulled my phone. It's nothing wrong with the ability, a person's ability. We're not talking about cognitive ability. We're not talking about learning disabilities. And you can learn anything in whatever area you find yourself in life when it comes to how the brain works. Primarily when I begin to see people around me that just were hell-bent on staying stuck with where they are. Again, it began to highlight that it was about desire to want to do it different. And if you didn't have a desire to do it differently, you could have had the desire, but you didn't have the self-intuitiveness or self-love to want to do it different. It's no different than a person loving themselves to know that if they're obese, to lose weight so they can be healthier. If you know that you have lupus, and I can't really do shit about having lupus, but I can see my doctors and I can take my medications and change my diet and live differently so I can manage the lupus. So that self-value and self-worthiness and self-love has deep-rooted tentacles that have been beat out of us or was just never cultivated to begin with. And that in and of itself, for the people who are not outwardly abusing others, that abuse has been turned inwards. And what we think are just very slight things. 40 and 50-year-old people with no high school diplomas who are functionally illiterate. And in something as serious as where we are now with the coronavirus crisis, some of you all are just going to be dealing with, unfortunately, a shittier end of a very shitty stick. Like, you're not getting a stimulus. You're probably not going to apply for any of the loans that are out there if you own a business, because you're probably in a job or situation or something where you really just don't have a way out. But why are we still living like that? Why? It's got nothing to do with you personally. But now we got to really talk about who you are as a person and what you contribute to the world. You're responsible for that, no one else. No one else. So with abuse, guys, my father, and I can't remember if I brought it up in the podcast or not, but to just speak life into it and release it. The worst of what happened to me during the abuse was my sister and I can't remember if it was my brother or not, but we were preparing to go to a New Edition concert. If it wasn't New Edition, it was DVD. I can't remember. And for years, she held me responsible for us not going. My father had just, again, being a control freak, had this thing with just if your shoe was out of place, you got knocked across the room. If you were washing dishes and you didn't dry up every little drop of water that was on the counter, you got hit in the back of the head. I mean, you just really just didn't know what was what with this guy. The worst abuse at the hands of my father was getting ready for this concert, and we were in a rush to get going. I think I came home from practice, something, whatever. I was in sports as a kid, late, rushing to get ready to go to this concert, and I was ironing jeans on my bed. And that was just, you ain't ironing on the bed, use the ironing board, use the floor if you have to, but ain't ironing on the bed. And his rationale, yes, I get it. You could set the mattress on fire and burn the whole house down, and I get all of that. And I can't remember if he came home drunk, already drunk, right off work or whatever. I ain't blaming none of his behaviors on the alcohol, because that was up to you to not be an alcoholic, also on you to not be an abuser. And I don't know what he did or came into the room to do something. I guess he saw the iron there, didn't see the ironing board. I really don't know what the hell happened. I wasn't trying to hide it. I was just in a rush. The iron, I already unplugged it, and I was getting dressed, and just him flying into a rage about where was I ironing and this or that. My father held me down on the bed, face down, the back of my head forcibly, my neck into the mattress, took the iron and began ironing it over my upper lower legs and my rear end. And I'm kind of squirming, tugging, and whatnot, and he's just going in on trying to make this point on this is what's happening when you burning my mattresses and you this and you that. I don't know if he did know if the iron was still hot. And I got burned through the jeans and all. I can feel it being hot. Didn't know how bad it was. I remember getting up and going, I can't remember if it was a weekday, something, whatever. These memories get, whatever, muddled 30, 40 years later, whatever. At this point, I'm 46 now, so this happened to me when I was maybe around 12, 13, maybe, something. And I remember going to school, waking up the next day or the next 2 days and just feeling just this pain on my ass, you know. Really couldn't say anything. I just knew it was there. And again, had the type of mother that whatever my father did is just what he did. It wasn't no, let me go to my mother and get some help, because that wasn't happening. She just was no help. She was abused herself, didn't love herself, really didn't want to have kids by this monster, but that's what she ended up being, and probably felt she was trapped in this marriage. And I can remember packing wet towels in my jeans just to be able to sit down. Never took it to a teacher, never took it to anything. Again, I can't remember really that the environment was all that open to talking about abuse or whatever. But I remember a couple days after we were sitting for dinner, and I can remember not being able to sit comfortable. So she's like, what is going on? Sit down, sit still. And I'm just like, I can't. So I don't remember if it was a light color pair of pants, whatever the case was. But again, it had the wet towel in it, so I think it had wet the pants, and she could see the wet spot on the pants. And then she began to ask, like, what are you doing? What's happening? And then her thing always flying into a rage when you're doing something outside of whatever. She understands. And I told her, I said, it hurts back there. And she asked me what happened. I told her. She's like, what are you talking about? And she took me into a bedroom, had me take my pants off. And at this point, what I didn't realize is the skin had started to peel away. And that's what was hurting. She was taking the towels off. That was the one and only time I saw any type shock, horror. I can't believe anything from my mother. Dad comes home from work again. She flies into this rage on him. The first and only time I ever heard my mother say, this is abuse. You're hurting my children. Ever had it. Ever heard her say it. She brought him into the room. I'm on the bed where she had started to put some cream or something on my butt. I still don't remember about how big it was. And until I started having vitiligo, it was always a little light spot anyway that I could see years later after it started to heal, that the skin just never really healed itself. My father came in, looked at it, looked at me, turned around and walked out of the room. Maybe it was later the next day. We were at dinner at the table. He came in, knelt down, tried to kiss me, hug me, and he apologized. Only time he ever apologized. Never happened before then, never happened after then, because abuse to whatever level never stopped. It didn't happen again like that, but it didn't stop. I cried, and I can just remember part of me. And this being my dad and my hero, it died. It died. It was gone. I spent too many years, as they taught me, to mask it, to cover it up, to not talk about it, to whatever. No authorities were called. We had a next door neighbor that was a nurse. She didn't get involved. Just another swept under the rug and do whatever. He would put on a nice guy act again for a while, and then out come the other real part of him later. With that being said, that was the worst of what happened to me as a child in the form of physical abuse. One of my other videos for Confession of Being a Woman spoke of my brother who sexually molested me. So to grow up in a home where you didn't know whether you were going to get beat from one day to the next or what you were going to get beat for, and for it to show up in my life 46 years later, and to know that in the midst of this being a global pandemic, and people are trapped in a house, this behavior doesn't stop because there's a global pandemic. Coronavirus is blowing around. It doesn't stop. There's a child somewhere being abused right now. There's a woman somewhere being abused right now. There's a daughter, an aunt, a sister, our sons, our boys, our teenagers, our uncles. Someone is being abused right now. Abuse doesn't stop. Abuse in and of itself is the monster. If you could learn to disassociate it from the people, that's fine. Do what you need to do to love you and to forgive yourself for not being able to be your own superhero from those past years. That's fine as well. I had a real hard time for that for years, feeling guilty. I wanted to run away. I wanted to go through all of that stuff. All of that shit was coming up. I had an instance where I ran away, ran to a neighbor's house, told her I wanted to run away. She turned around and called my parents and said, hey, your daughter's up here saying she wanted to run away. They played the nice people again, this, that, and other. Nothing happened. I had to be my own superhero. I had to get the fuck away from these people. Because, yes, you want to kill them, you want to hurt them, you want to do all of that. None of that helps anything. And for the people who have internalized that anger and it bursts out, I totally get now where the repeated cycle of that comes out. Rapists, murderers, predators, killers, that type thing. I totally get it. It's not right? No. I'm not advocating it? No. Internalized, that's where we get suicide rates from. People kill themselves. When they don't want to do either of those, that's where then they haven't learned other coping mechanisms. Primarily, love yourself, one, get the fuck away from this shit, two. begin to grow and learn new behavior. 3, before they get on that road, then it's very easy to grab for the next thing to help numb the pain. And that's self-medication. Alcohol, drugs, shopping addictions, sex addictions, food addictions, what have you. I'm here to tell you today, people, that there is a way out. You are the gatekeeper of your own destiny, of your own life. It ain't up to nobody else to get you out that situation. It's got to be on you. If you're not literally physically a kid, a child that has to depend on another adult for your survival, you are an adult and it's up to you. Walk away from this shit. It gets better. I can't say easy, but it will get better. Get the fuck away from these people if you can. Leave them where they are. They will eventually die. Whether the pain that they gave you will ever die, it will dissipate. It will get easier. Their pain that they're wallowing in, it ain't up to you to fix these motherfuckers. It's up to them. As I told my father years ago, getting that courage. The father that he had was not the grandfather that I knew. So I do see that change now. But I still have my truth. So he can't be so much of a loving grandfather when he was such an abusive father. So this is about people learning and growing. But when you fail to atone and acknowledge to the very people you hurt, I don't give a fuck how much toys and vacations and shit you buy people. It will never take away what you've done to other people. You just want to go through life with this appearance of being a good person, and you're not. And you didn't know how to be that back then. So until the words, if for those of you who want it, actually get said to you, fuck an apology, acknowledgement. I don't need your apology. That ain't gonna change shit. Okay? Acknowledge what you've done. Speak the truth on what you've done. My hurt is up to me to change it. It would be nice to have an abuser acknowledge their abuse. The reality is, at this point now, they're cowards because they can't acknowledge it, because whatever in their head and whoever they think is going to come find them and arrest them at 60 and 70-year-old fucking senior citizens. You got 40-something-year-old children out here, but you're the best grandparent in the world. Parents, keep your children away from these motherfuckers until the truth about the abuse is spoken. Arm your children with the truth as soon as they're able to process it. Because if you do not, you're preparing them to be abused. They won't be able to come to you and tell you that they're abused because you've normalized the abuse. You taught them to be quiet about abuse. And this is another example of how the cycle continues. So I urge all of you right now to dig deep. Find the courage to love yourself. Find the courage to move away from the bullshit. Find the courage to pick up the phone. And if don't put yourself in harm's way, find the courage to pick up the phone and call in help for those that are still battling this very real sickness. Coronavirus ain't gonna hit all of us, and the reality is abuse, regular intimate partner abuse, mother to child abuse, spousal abuse, whatever, that's still a very real thing. It's a monster. There are more people suffering from that every day of the week than people that will be affected by this virus. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you guys for listening. Again, tuning into Confessions of Being a Woman. Please jump in the comments, give me your thoughts, like and share this video, share it out with different people. Let me know what you think. Please go to the link for NAASCA, the podcast on Blog Talk Radio. I will put the dates and the times in there, and I think it just has me listed as the host or the co-host for that day, and then we have just general panelists. Wasn't a lot of us, maybe 8, 9, 10 tops on the call, different people chiming in to ask some questions, giving their thoughts, and I'm scheduled to be back on in another couple of weeks or months, but please, I wish all of you the best. Stay safe, stay in your home, do what you need to do to fight this virus out there, but there are other bigger monsters in the world. Monsters ain't taking a day off because coronavirus is out. If they are taking a day off, it's because they just don't want to get sick with coronavirus, because they're going to jump right back into their monstrous ass behavior as soon as this bullshit is over. So send your prayers out, send your best wishes out, but please know that abuse is real, and abuse doesn't always have the best happy ending. Yeah. So for me, this could have been a very tragic ending years ago. I had to make a choice to love myself enough to do it different. And with that, I leave you. Have a great day. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Stop abuse now. Thank you.